Secretary of State Kerry is set to resume talks tonight on Iran's nuclear program ahead of this month's deadline to strike a deal. But those talks were complicated when 47 Republican senators sent this letter to Iran's leaders. They wrote, "The next president could revoke such an executive agreement with the stroke of a pen, and future Congresses could modify the terms of the agreement at any time." The White House responded last night warning Congress to stop interfering in the negotiations. Joining us now, two members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Republican John Barrasso of Wyoming, who signed that Iran letter, and Democrat Ben Cardin of Maryland, who says it was a partisan effort to weaken the president at a critical time. Senators, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
Senator Barrasso, here's how Secretary Kerry described your letter to Iran's leaders this weekend. Here he is. Well, all right. Anyway, he was very unhappy with it, and he said apparently, he's never been better, incidentally, that this was a terrible negotiation and interfering with the effort to make a peace deal. And White House Chief of Staff, and let's put this up, I hope we've got this, Dennis McDonough sent a warning last night that legislation that is being proposed suggesting that Congress must approve a deal would likely have a profoundly negative impact on the ongoing negotiations. Senator Barrasso, is it unreasonable for the White House to say, wait until we see what the deal is, if there's a deal, before you start weighing in?
The president has said only after they sign the deal will Congress get a chance to weigh in. And this letter last night from the White House was to both parties, because this is bipartisan legislation. The letter last night said that the president wants to go first to the Security Council of the United Nations before going to the Congress of the United States. And you have to ask, why is that? Why is he saying both to Republicans and Democrats, sit down and be quiet? And I think it's because it's a bad deal that the president is so eager and desperate because of his legacy to get any deal that he's going to sign a bad one.
Senator Cardin, as Senator Barrasso points out, there's a bipartisan group of senators that have been proposing legislation to say, look, once you get a deal, we want to be able to weigh in on it. It was very close to a veto-proof majority. What do you think of the demand, and you can see it in this letter, that Congress must not interfere with the White House and that you got to stay out of it?
Well, look, our objective is to get an agreement with Iran where they give up their nuclear weapon breakout capacity. That's our objective. We want the president to have the strength of the United States behind his negotiations. The letter signed by the 47 senators weakened the president's negotiating ability. That was wrong. There's no agreement yet, and we have to give the president the opportunity to negotiate an agreement, because that is the best option for the United States.
But you were in favor of the Corker legislation, correct?
The Congress is going to have to be engaged here. We imposed the sanctions.
So what do you think of the president saying, stay out of it?
The president's letter says he doesn't want to see any action before the March 24th deadline, and I agree with that.
I think he was saying until there's a deal signed, period.
No, if you read the letter, he said during these negotiations, there'll be plenty of time afterwards. He also said that Congress is going to have to take action in regards to the sanctions. I do think Congress has a role to play, and there's a bipartisan effort for how Congress should review any agreement reached by the president in regards to the Iran sanctions, because we imposed the sanctions, the Congress of the United States.
But wait a minute on that, because if there's a deal, the White House says it won't be a treaty, it will be something called an executive agreement. And this weekend, Secretary Kerry, and boy, I hope that we see this one, was very clear about what that will mean.
As far as we are concerned, the Congress has no ability to change an executive agreement.
So he's saying, once that's signed, you guys are out of it. And I want to get back to Senator Barrasso's point, because at the same time, the White House is saying, and Dennis McDonough does in the letter, we're going to take this to the UN and ask them, if we get a deal, to lift sanctions. So what do you think about this idea? Yeah, we're going to put it to a vote at the UN, but Congress, per Secretary Kerry, is going to have to stay out.
The president has certain powers as president of the United States. The Congress has powers as the legislative branch. We respect both branches. The president has every right to enter into agreements. Every president has done that in major policy agreements with other countries and multinational agreements. He has every right to do that. Ultimately, the Congress is the policy arm of government. We have the right to pass legislation. We can counter what the president has done. We can support what the president has done. In regards to Iran, we have a common objective, and that objective is to prevent Iran from having the capacity for a nuclear weapon.
So when John Kerry says Congress has no ability to change an executive agreement, you say...
I don't think it's exactly what the Secretary said.
No, it is. I've got the quote right here.
But it was in context to an agreement entered into with the President and other countries. The President has the right to do that. Congress can pass laws, and if those laws become effective, those laws control.
Senator Barrasso, for all the GOP outrage about this arrangement and an executive agreement, the fact is it isn't so unusual. Let's put up some history on the screen. The 2012 strategic partnership that President Obama worked out with Afghanistan was an executive agreement. And so was the 2009 Status of Forces agreement that President Bush negotiated with Iraq. So what's the difference?
Well, when Barack Obama was in the Senate and Joe Biden was in the Senate, they co-sponsored legislation that said the Bush arrangement with Iraq had to come to Congress. This is my concern. A world where Iran has a nuclear weapon is less safe, less secure, and the concern is that this is going to be a bad agreement. We were supposed to actually dismantle Iran's capacity for a nuclear weapon, and now the president has gotten to a point where, no, it's just about delaying. It's not about stopping. It's about managing. So those are the concerns that I see, a bad agreement coming. I think that we are seeing Iran taking more and more power, and across the whole Middle East, they have this arc of dominance that is including not just Iraq, but Iraq, as well as Syria, all the way to the Mediterranean.
Let me, if I can, talking about Iran. Here is the letter, the letter that you and 46 other Republicans signed, sent to the leaders of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And in fact, you got an answer from the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who says that the GOP letter shows, and let's put this up on the screen, Washington is disintegrating and is a, quote, sign of a decline in political ethics in the U.S. Senator Barrasso, if there's no deal, haven't you in effect given Iran a weapon that they can say if these talks break down, hey, look, you have the half of the Senate saying, you know, whatever the deal is, we're not going to abide by it. Haven't you given them a weapon to blame it on the U.S. and isn't going to make it harder for an international coalition of us with our allies to maintain sanctions against Iran?
I think it's very important with regard to Iran to make sure that no deal is better than a bad deal, and I'm very concerned about a bad deal.
That's not my point, sir. What I'm saying is by sending this letter, you could have sent it to the president, you could have sent it to the American people. By sending it to the leader of Iran, haven't you given him an excuse, and the hardliners an excuse, to drop out saying, hey, 47 Republican senators say this is worthless?
I think by sending that letter, we focused the attention where it should be on the debate about the deal. The president hasn't wanted to talk about it for 6 years, Iran with a nuclear weapon. Now the focus is on what it means if Iran gets a nuclear weapon to use themselves, to give to terrorists who can use it against us. And this is all about Iran and sanctions. They want the money. Iran wants the money so they can then spend it in other ways for terrorism.
I've got a minute left, and I want to ask Senator Cardin about something else this is about. Doesn't President Obama bear some responsibility for this? He's taken executive action. He's ignored Congress, whether it comes to immigration or climate change or Cuba. And isn't this a response to the fact that the president has ignored the separation of powers under the Constitution?
No, I think the president's actions is where Congress didn't act. The Congress would have passed immigration.
I understand, but under the Constitution, Congress has to act. The president doesn't get to.
But Congress has not acted in these issues.
I know, but then there's no action.
The president has inherent powers. He can use those powers. If Congress takes action, Congress will speak, and that's so we can always have the last word if we can, but we have to pass action.
Senator Barrasso, to what degree did the president's executive actions play into this?
Well, I think it played into it a lot. You know, the American public is very concerned about this president, and I mean, the sad truth is he does a very bad job on foreign relations. He's done it with the Syria and the Red Line. He's done it with ISIS in terms of underestimating, calling him a JV team. Yemen, he called a success story right until the Iranians took over Yemen. So I think that the president needs input from Congress. He would benefit from input from Congress.
Senator Barrasso, Senator Cardin, we want to thank you both so much for coming in today. We'll stay on top of these talks.
And Wyoming's going to the sweet to the 64 of the NCAA. They won the Mountain West tournament last night.
So's Harvard.
So is Maryland.
So's Maryland. There you go. Up next, we're very happy